What's the most fricked up thing you used to think as a child? I used to think my grandma just happened to know my mom, like they were just old friends or something. It hadn't occurred to me that my parents also had parents. I used to ask my grandparents where their kids were and what time they were getting home from school. They would laugh and try to explain, but I didn't get it at the time. It didn't occur to my sister that our parents had names other than Mama and Daddy until she was about 6. I used to think it was some big secret. I would hear my parents using their real names, and I would try my hardest to memorize them like they were the books in Fahrenheit 451. It might say something of my mental abilities at that age that I could never remember them. I used to argue with my mum that it was wrong to arrest a murderer for murder. He's a murderer. That's what he's supposed to do. You can't arrest a baker for baking. This is some flawless logic right here. I'm going to start throwing around the phrase "you can't arrest a baker for baking" like it's some kind of meaningful proverb. Hey, what are you doing? Don't do that. You can't arrest a baker for baking. Baker's gonna bake. My dad worked out of town, and during the weekend when he was home, he'd got to the beer store for a case for the house. For some reason my messed up kid had thought my dad was at the beer store for the whole week. This culminated in kindergarten when I stood up in the front of the class and told everywhere that when I grew up I wanted to work at the beer store so I could see my daddy every day. My mum still says it was the most embarrassing parent-teacher interview she's ever been in. Ontarian? Yeah, LOL. At the time, Sudburian. Actually, when I was in 2nd grade we would practice writing for standardized testing. One question we got was something along the lines of, "What's something that you've done for someone else?" My answer was close to, "Sometimes my dad hits my mum with a baseball bat." One time it was making her really sad so I got in between him and her and took the hits for her. Of course it would have been more accurate to say, "Sometimes my dad takes this shitty plastic kid's bat when my mum is reading the paper and smacks it to be annoying." I got in between them because he was really starting to get on her nerves. So the teacher pulls me aside one day and asks me a couple questions. I don't remember them too well. I do remember going to the school counselor later and being asked about 50 questions about my dad. Do you feel safe at home, etc. So, she gave me a lollipop and sent me home. My mum was curious why I had a lollipop, so I told her, and the next day my parents had to go into school to clear some things up. I had something similar happen from the other end. My daughter was playing at a neighbor's house. She tripped and did a faceplant on their patio. She ended up with a cut on the bridge of her nose and 2 very pretty black eyes. No concussion, nothing that serious. The gash was not bad so I just put a band-aid on it. The next day she went to school and, of course, the teacher asked her what happened to her nose. She said Dad did it. So my wife gets a call from the school and has to explain what happened. When the little princess gets home, her mum chews her ass out for lying and sends her to her room for some personal reflection time until I arrive. I get home to find a very upset little girl crying in her room. I asked why she told the teacher such an awful thing. She replied, "But you did do it." Upon further investigation I found out she thought the teacher was asking about the band-aid. She reaped the rewards of mommy and daddy feeling like shit for about a week. I used to think babies came out immediately after sex. Whoa, that's terrifying. Oh god, the condom broke. Plop. That probably would remove so much stress from waiting and not knowing if a girl were pregnant, but also see a huge spike in newborn murders. Drop in the number of abortions though. When I first learned about sex in 5th grade, I thought how long you could last was how long you ejaculated. So if a guy could last 20 minutes, I thought that meant he would come for 20 straight minutes. I learned about sex in 5th grade too, right around the time I learned about Benjamin Franklin. Upon hearing he had like 12 siblings, I was astounded that his parents had sex 13 times. Oh god, the mental image. Curse you. You still get an upvote for that strange painful image. I know, I mean, can you imagine the mess? Frick, Kleenex would be the biggest company on earth. I couldn't really grasp special effects in movies. When I saw someone die, I believed that person died. And in my attempt to reason it out, I came to the conclusion that the person playing the character in the movie wanted to die and volunteered for the role. Along the same line, when I was little I thought that the show Rescue 911 was real footage of events, and I always wondered why the cameraman was just filming instead of helping. Rescue 911 was awesome. And it was always followed by Unsolved Mysteries, another one of my favorites. The host of it was awesome. I used to think that women urinated blue ink and that's what those maxi pads were for. Huh, I thought something similar. That shade should be called euphemism blue. Bluephemism. I used to think that deodorant was supposed to be applied to the forearm, because in the commercials of the 90s they always tested it on random forearms to show you it was clear. When I was about 7, my grandma gave me a pack of girls' hygiene items. She was a teacher and I guess they had some left over from the sex health ed class, and I used to put it on my forearm every day. So, where did you put the tampons? I used to believe all land was directly over water. So all pavement was laid directly over the ocean. So I was terrified that if I stepped on a crack in the sidewalk, a shark would burst through and eat me. I used to think the turning signal in a car was actually telling you which way to turn. And I was amazed that I was born on my birthday, of all days. Similar. I thought the car knew where you wanted to turn. I never saw that my parents were controlling the little lever. On a similar note, my niece, she was 5 at the time, thought she controlled the volume in my car by saying up or down. She had no idea that I would use the buttons on the steering wheel to adjust the volume at her demand. I'd be amazed when my dad would say, "I'm tired of waiting at this red light. Turn green." And it would. Well, my sister died of cancer at 8, and I was 5 when that happened. So, my genius psychologist uncle thought that it was a good idea to deny me the funeral of my own sister, because it would be too shocking. Bad mistake. When I returned home after being sent to some cousin's house while the funeral was on and not finding her on returning, I started to believe that my parents hid her from me in order to punish me. So, in those 3 months after her death I behaved so nicely, fearing so much to anger them, even one bit. And then I asked my mother in a trembling voice, "You know, you should have noticed that I have behaved myself lately. So, I want to see her if I may." She obviously didn't understand. I made sure she did. She started to cry and screamed at me, saying that she was dead and that she can't bring her home. In that moment I realized that I fricked up. Not because I realized my sister was really dead, it was because I pissed my mother off and I could never see my sister again as a punishment. After 6 months I kinda accepted my fate, and the last thing I remember I did then was to take one of her dresses and I put it on. Nothing gay, if I may say. I still remember why I did it. I wanted to touch her one more time. I saw my arm, and I could see hers, and I started to rub my arms one with the other, each other. And then I started to cry for her death for the first time. I'm 30 years old now, and even now I'm not 100% sure if she's still dead, living a life away from me. I know it's crazy, but I can't help it, it's a part of me now. That's really sad, and I completely understand the dress thing. Anything to feel closer. My brother was killed 6 years ago when I was 24, and an irrational part of me still thinks I see him on the street and for a split second I'll think, maybe he got into some really bad trouble and had to fake his death. I know it makes no sense, but he was always kind of a superhero to me, so for just that split second, it's completely reasonable. I thought dogs and cats were males and females of the same animal. Still to this day, whenever I see a dog I think male dog, and whenever I see a cat I think female cat, even though I know it could be either. Not messed up on my part, but when I was 4 turning 5, I really wanted to be black for my birthday. I'm as white as they come. I was sitting in a shopping cart in a supermarket line with my mum ahead of me, with a sweet old black grandma behind us. While my mother was distracted with the groceries, my 4-year-old brain decided it would be the perfect time to proclaim to everyone in line, "For my birthday I want to be black." Needless to say, my mother was beside herself. While she was tripping over herself trying to find the words to apologize to this woman, the old black grandma just slowly put her hand on my head, leaned over and whispered, "No child, no you don't." My mum cried all afternoon. My son has autism and dearly wanted to be black when he was younger. At his doctor's office, while I was signing him in, he scooted his scrawny white ass up in the middle of a black family that was sitting on the couch, leaned back, sighed happily and said, "Ah, I'm black now." The kid loves research and demographics. Begged for the longest time for us to move cross country to the what school district. That if you moved everyone who had AIDS to an island, the AIDS problem would be solved. I had no concept of human rights or anything. I thought Pokemon cards were a sound investment strategy. The rumor at our school was that Charizard was about $100. Like 3 years of first edition Charizard in pristine condition could go $4, $250, $300. I dunno. I don't know much about Pokemon cards. Let me call in a buddy of mine to come take a look. I can give you like $10 for it. I gotta make a profit. I thought L, M, N, O, P was one letter in the alphabet song. Something like El Amino P. At some point when I was little, I realized there was a letter N. I guess I heard all N's as Ms. I remember telling people N was a new letter that just came out. I used to think I could do anything I set my mind to. Equals.